Hi there, welcome once again. In the last video we introduced to Python, although it was a very short video. Yeah, we had to do it that. It is worth mention that the material we are using, these slides, will be available. I'll be dropping the link on in the description box below, so you can always want to download or check it in a PDF form. Alright, so in today's video we'll be looking at print function and literals. Alright, let's get started. So in the print function, we'll be talking about the escape character using multiple arguments, keyword arguments, and we'll see something to play with, which is going to be in the lab section. Alright, so what is the print function? So I want us to have at the back of our mind, this tutorial is meant for absolute newcomers. So for those who have a little knowledge, you would be surprised that we are going at a very slow speed or slow rate, but then it's just to be able to carry everyone along. But then please do follow us so you would gain one or two things. Alright, so the print function, as you can see, we are seeing something here. We have print hello world. But then it is worth to mention that you see some things in this in this line of code where we have print hello world. So the first thing you see is the print name, which is the function name, and also you see an argument, which is the hello world. The hello world here is called a string argument because it is inside a string. As you can see here, we have a string here before the H in hello world and after the exclamation here. That is why it's called a string argument. Alright, so just a quick one, we'll just mention some things about function, although we'll be treating them later on in this tutorial. So functions, what are functions? Functions can cause some effects, e.g. they can send text to the terminal, they could draw an image. Functions can evaluate a value. They can an example is when you're trying to get the square root of a value or the length of a text. There it could evaluate a value. It can also return results after evaluating such value. For instance, after getting the square root of 4, we are expected to return the value 2. Yeah, a function can do that, and it may come from a Python. It may come from Python, meaning that it can be predefined, or it can come from modules, meaning that somebody else have written these functions for you, all for you to just call that function and use it. Or you can also write the functions by yourself. Alright, so let's see more examples in the print function. And yeah, it's getting more interesting where we see this line of code. We have something like this. We have print, let me introduce myself. And we have an empty line, something like print. And we have I am Python, Monty Python. Alright, so I will quickly demonstrate that on VS Code, which is Visual Studio Code, like I said, we'll be using for this for the purpose of this tutorial. And I want to believe we are familiar with a little bit of the terminal, but if not, I believe as you follow along, you'll get familiar with it. So VS Code is also available for download. Once you just search VS Code on Google, you should be able to see the download. Yeah, so that's just to probably carry some of us along to see what it looks like. So for instance, when I said you could go to google.com and search for VS Code, yeah, I could say download. Yeah, so VS Code download is say code.visualstudio.com. So if I click on that, it takes me straight to where I could download for my Windows, or yeah, for Linux users, Debian and Fedora SUS here. You can see the RPM, and for Mac users, you have it here. So yes, you could always download from there. code.visualstudio.com/download. Alright. So currently it's just a new window open here. So I would create a new file. So let me do Control N, or I can just come here and do new text file. So I click on that. So as you can see, it is untitled. So if I type something like print, let's say for my example, let's say let me introduce myself. So you see some coloring going on there. Yeah, that is the work of the IDE, which is definitely different from using a text editor. When I mean a text editor, like your notepad. Alright, so I've done this, so I need to save my file. I'm going to do Control S. Yeah, I'll just call it the main.py. Let me call it main.py. Although I have it saved already, so I just say saved. Yeah, I want to replace it here. So I have main.py. So if I want to see where I have this saved, as you can see, I just hover my mouse on top of the name and it's showing me the parts where this file is saved. Alright. So there are two ways of running this code in VS Code. So I can either open a new terminal, which is here, then this comes up. Then I can change my directory to where the file is saved, which is inside 30 days folder. Then the name of the file is, when I type dir to see what is in that folder, I have this, and I have main.py. Yeah, sure. Sorry. Alright, so I want to run this code. Like I said, we have two ways of running Python code in VS Code. The first way is by typing Python, then the name of the file, main.py, then enter. Or I come to click on this run button here, which is run Python file, as you can see there. So I can click on run Python file and it will definitely run. So let us try this first. If I click there, you see it's generated this code from here, yeah, from here, which is where the Python, which is where my Python is installed locally. Then the part where the file is installed, where my main.py is saved, then it ran it. But then, so what this does, it calls the Python executable file and also the file that I want to run, which is main.py. But this way it is using the old path to where the Python executable file is, and also the old path to where my Python file is. But then because I have Python installed globally on my system, so I can easily change directory to where my Python file is saved, which is inside 30 days, and type Python, then the name of my file, my Python file, then enter. So I still get the same result as I get here. Let me introduce myself. All right, so let me just explain what is going on here. So we have the print function here. That is the name. As you can see, we have print and it collects some values, and it has a separator and an end argument too. But then for now, we are just using the string argument here. So as you can see, we have let me introduce myself on the first line. And if you notice, the very first thing that comes out from our print function here, it is let me introduce myself. Then the second line, we have nothing printed here. Why? Because we are printing nothing. So although we have not called anything inside the parentheses here, Python still prints an empty line or an empty space to the terminal, which is what we can see here. Nothing is printed here, which is a gap between let me introduce myself and I am Python, Monty Python. Then the third line is where we have I am Python, Monty Python, all inside these strings. That is why it is called a string argument. All of them inside the string, everything here inside the string. So it is seeing it as just one argument. All right. So we've seen the output and what it looks like running that particular code. Let me introduce myself. Alright, so as we mentioned, we'll be treating some one or two things. The very first one we want to mention is the escape or the new line character. Alright, so we'll talk about the escape character, then we'll go in detail, a bit more detail on how to use it. Alright, so let me come back to this. So let me assume I have this Python code, print I am Python, Monty Python, and I save this file and let me run it. Python main.py. Here you see I am Python Monty.python. Now let's assume I want to have this one line of code, but then I want Monty Python to be printed on a different kind of line. Yeah, that is where we have the escape character. So I will show you that on the, yeah, so this is it. So we have I am Python, then we have this backward slash and n, and we have multi Python. Now what does that do? You said something is new, we have the backward slash and n. What does that do? The backslash that you can see there, it is called the escape character, and it means that the series of character in that strings escapes the moment, and whenever it escapes the moment, it produces a special effect. All right, let me take that again. After the backslash in a print function, Python says whatever or the immediate character or series of characters after that backslash, it combines together with the backslash to produce a special effect. In this case, we are putting just a single character at the back, which is this n. And what this n does in Python is that it creates a new line character. We call it a new line character. Now we are using it with this n, and it is called a new line character. It makes the console to start a new output line. So let us see that in action in our code. So you see now I'm adding that backward slash and n. You see, the first time without the n, it printed this out. So I've added the backslash and n. So I'm saving my file, then I'm running my code, Python, then the name of my Python file, python.py. Yeah, so as you can see, we have I am Python on a single line, and we have multi Python on another line. Now that is what this is doing there. It is called a new line character. So Python escapes, this is the escape character, which is backslash. It escapes the immediate character, which is n, and it forms a first special effect by going onto a new line on the console. So immediately after I am Python, it sees this and went to a new line to create the following string argument, which is multi Python on a different line. Although in our Python code, they are all on a single line. All right, so that is a little bit about the escape and new line character. All right, so we have in the print function, we could use multiple arguments. Now when we say multiple arguments, remember I've been saying we've been using just one argument. So if you see the sample down here, we have multi Python. Everything is inside a quote, as you can see. So that is a single string argument. But if you see what is going on up here, we have multiple kind of strings here. So you've opened a string here and you are closing it here, meaning that everything inside here is a string argument, and that is just one string argument, then followed by a comma. This comma means that we are trying to create multiple arguments, meaning that the first string argument is a separate string argument standing alone by itself, and another one is being created called arm, then Python. So if you should run this, it will still return your expected value, or it's just that you'll be having spaces in between. So excuse me, so we have something like that here. So if I should remove this here, the space, this and a comma. Okay, so we have these two. Sorry about that. Yeah, so if I should run this, yeah, you see we are still having the same thing. It's just that the space that I've not added here is automatically there now. I am Python. And so I would explain briefly why that space is being added. So in Python we have uh, there is this argument. It is called a separator, and the argument what it does is, what that argument does is to add a separator. There is a default separator there. So we'll quickly take that and see how to use that. So yeah, it is a keyword argument and it is called SCP. So by default, it is an empty space that is always there. So that is why when we have these multiple arguments, I am Python, we're having spaces in between. We're having spaces in between after running that code. Right, so let me run our code again. Sorry. Right. So when we run that code again, we have I am Python and there are spaces in between, and that is because there is a keyword argument called SCP. So by the time I put this comma, you see these are the options. You see SCP is showing here, and we also have the END, which is the end. We'll talk about that not quite long. Very soon, we'll be talking about that very soon. So let's use the SCP. So like I said, by default, it is an empty space like this that is always there by default, or even if it is typed out or not, it is always by default like that. So if I should run this code again, I'm expecting to have this exact same result. So if I should run that code again, you see, yeah, we got the exact same result. So for us to see that it is working, let me put a dash there, then let us run that code again. You see we're having I dash dash Python, meaning that there is a separator in between every multiple argument. So for every multiple argument, whatever is inside this separator keyword argument is what applies for every single argument that are separated. So for every multiple argument that we have here, the separator, whatever element or whatever character that is inside the separator goes into here. So again, by default, it is an empty space. So you might want to follow the what's it called? This guide. Yeah, so it kind of slowing us down, so I might not be referring back to it again. So I'll just go ahead to be showing us live demo instead. All right, so let's see the other kind of arguments. We have END. We have the END argument. By default, the END argument has this new line character there by default. For us to know that it does have it, let us see a sample. So if I should have something like this and I say print I am on a new line. So what we expect is that this should print on a separate line and this should also print on a separate line. Yes. But why is it that this particular line is not printing on the same line as this? Let's see that. Let us run the code. You see, as we've guessed, we are right. This should print on a separate line. I am Python, and this should print on another line. I am on a new line. So just to show that the END argument is by default the new line character. So if I should run this, we should get the exact same result. Yeah, you see. So what does this mean? It means that you could also alter this and put a space. And when you put a space, instead of going to the new line to come and print this guy, Python does not do that. It will just add a space, an empty space. Then this new I am on a new line continues on the same line. So to test this out, let us run the code. Here, as you can see now, we have I am Python, then I am on a new line, which is no longer on a new line. It is now I am on the same line, as you can see. Although in our code we have them on different lines. So I think it is worth to mention here. If you have questions, you can always drop them in the comment section below, and yeah, we would always attend to them, or in the Discord server. All right. So we would move on to the next part. So yeah, just to mention, we can also use all of the arguments together, which is this separator. The separator argument. Let's say we want to use the dash. Yeah, the dash and also the end argument here together. So what this does is for every multiple argument, for every separated argument in here, it will add a dash to the back, that is I dash am dash Python, then a space at the end, then continue this guy on the same line. So if I should run this code, see, like I said, the separator is working here. As you can see, these two dashes here, and that's because it is on this line. It's adding a dash here and a dash here. Then the end is a space, an empty space, which is here. then it continues. I am on a new line on the same line, which is like that. So remember, you can always use anything. Let me use 3 stars, 3 asterisks, and let me run the same code. You see, at the end we have 3 asterisks, meaning that it is working. The keyword arguments are there. It's just left for us to see what it is. All right, so we have let's say a yeah, let's say a classwork to test. All right, so we said that we should print this output here on the console using the print function, where we have 5 4/2 is not 5 /2. So to try to do that, let me just write it out on the comment. So we are expected to print 5 4/2 is not 5 /2. Alright, so I'm putting that in the comments. So if naturally by default I'll just say, oh, this is simple, let me just use a string argument and say 5 /2 is not 5 /2, right? But if I should save this and I run it, by the way, this first line is called, it's a comment because it starts with an asterisk. Sorry, it starts with a pound. uh yeah, so let me remove that. We are just trying to show what we wanted to print anyway. So if I should run this, let's see what we have. Oh, cute, we have 5 4/2 is not 5 and a smiley, a laughing emoji. Like we said, the // is an escape character that whenever it is combined with a series of character or a single character, it forms a special meaning in Python. So that means whenever you use / and 2, it gives you a smiley. But then how do we then print / and 2 to the console? Because this is not what we want. So it's by simply escaping, is by adding another / here. If I should run this now, you see we have our expected results. All right, so one more try before we move on to literals. All right, so we have okay, so you could try, let's just move on to literals. You could try the other part. Yeah, there is an assignment, I think a lab. Yeah, there's a lab there to try out. So we are expected to print this. We should duplicate the arrow. This arrow, we should duplicate it using the print function. You could use a single print function or multiple print function as you wish. So we have the literals. So let us talk about literals. So literals are data in itself. What are data in itself? Something like integer, float, octa, hexadecimal, string, boolean value. So let us start with literals. Yeah, so as you can see, if we have something like 1 2 3 in a string, it is not the same as 1 2 3 without string. Now this 1 2 3 without string is a number, while this 1 2 3 inside string is a string. So you can also see it as an alphabet. Yeah, you could see it as an alphabet, while you can see this as a number, where you can add 1 2 3 plus 1 to give you 1 2 4. So for this, you can't add 1 2 3 plus 1, it will not give 1 2 4. So you see, this should actually print 1 3 to the console. So also this should also print 1 3 to the console, but then they are different. This is a string and this is a number. So this also is a string, why this is not a string. Now this is seen as a variable or a literal. All right, so we could want to try this out in our console. Let's see. So if we say print 1 2 3, so let me save and run. Yeah, you see we have 1 2 3. Yeah. So but then the difference is just if I should say +1 and I say save, you see we have a type error, can only concatenate string not integer. So this is a string, not integer. So let us try the other one, where we have 1 2 3 without strings. So let us print that. You see we have the same thing, but now the difference is that let us try to add 1 again. Let's see if we get an error or not. Yeah, we did not. Now this time we're having 1 to 4. meaning 1 to 3 plus 1 is giving us 1 to 4, which is what we expect. All right. So we move on to the next one, which is C. Let's try to print a string C. Let's see if this will print or give us an error. Oh, great. We have this, right? All right, let's remove the string and let's see. Let's print that. Yeah, we got an error, which is a name error. It says name C is not defined, meaning that C should have been defined as a variable, not as a literal. So the samples that we've seen so far, 1, 2, 3 without a string is a literal, meaning that it is data in itself, meaning this 1, 2, 3 can perform other things by itself. You can add, you could add 1 to this, you could subtract 1 from this, you could multiply by 2, you could divide by 3, whatever thing you want to do with this, it would always work. Unlike when you have 1, 2, 3 in the quoted string and you can't add, you can't subtract like that. So literals are data in itself. All right, so let's move on to integers and floats. So integers are numbers without fractions, where we have 2 and 3, something like that, and we have 1 1 and like that. So we have floats, a floating point or float. Floats are the ones with decimal, which is this dot here. Wherever you see a dot, that is a float. And we have for readability from Python 3.6 and above, we started using this underscore so as to be able to read data numbers. For instance, this is 11 million, and unlike just having it jam packed like this, and you have to squint your eyes to know, okay, is this 11 million or 1 million or that's 1 billion? No, so exactly. So we have this underscore to help us to help us be able to read these our numbers, and yes, it is valid in Python. Yeah, positive numbers do not need the positive sign in the front. You can leave it as this, but negative numbers definitely need it as this or as this guy with this underscore. It is still fine. We have the exponential, which is represented with capital letter E, the uppercase E or the lowercase e, and you can see samples like that. All right, we have the octal and the hexadecimal numbers, although we'll not be talking too much about that. But wherever you see a 0 and a O, either uppercase or lowercase letter O, that is an octadecimal number, an octal number here. Then when you have X at the back of O, like this, when you have 0 and letter O, that's octal. Then when you have 0 and letter X, either lowercase x or uppercase x, that's an hexadecimal number. Now we'll talk about strings. Here we've been mentioning strings before now, that wherever you see quotes, then it is a string. So just to mention, you can also see an apostrophe here. It is also a string. So let us assume we want to print a simple message saying I like Monty Python, where you have these double quotes here. So there is a way to do that, you know, just like I've shown you something earlier too. So let us try that. So when you want to print something like, you know, we have a string here. I say I like, then we have another string, Monty Python. So I believe this is what we wanted to print, but then it won't work that way, and the reason is because you see it's saying syntax error, because Python sees something called open and close. So whenever you have an open bracket, you must have a close bracket. So whenever you have an opening an opening quote, you should have a closing quote. It will not wait for the last one. It would expect you to close the quote almost immediately. So for you to be able to print this quote here inside here, you have to use an apostrophe outside here. An apostrophe outside here. So these are our opening apostrophe and these are closing apostrophe, our opening quote and the closing quote. Alright, so if we should run this now, we should get I like Monty Python, and Monty Python should be in string. Yeah, this is what we want to print. So the same way, if you want your output to have had just an apostrophe and not a double string, that means you can't have apostrophe outside. You would have a quote instead. So this way your code would run fine, just fine. Alright. So yeah, we've mentioned about how to print escape characters. Yeah, so you could also do it like this by escaping that character. Then that way, if you are escaping character, then you can have your quotes outside. So what Python does is it escapes this character, this quote, and assume it is not there. Then just print it out for you. So we have the Boolean, which is going to be the last thing we'll be talking here about in today's video. These are two distinct values, and they're either true or false, where true is represented by 1 and false is represented by 0. And can you guess the output of the following snippet of code? Right. So while you're guessing, I'll leave it to that and just tell you that in the next class we'll be talking about arithmetic operators, variables, and data type. Just a quick recap, we've talked about the print function and literals today. You can always pause the video and listen to it again. We don't want to exceed 30 minutes and we're out. Thank you. See ya.